is going on, everybody? It is Tuesday, Show Me the Money Club, live Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. We got a good show for you today. What's going on, Sergio? How you doing?
Excellent, sir. I got something in my eye.
Uh-oh.
Okay. All right.
All right. Well, let's get into the topic of conversation, what we're going to be talking about today. So we have a great rundown for you. We have our special guest, Len Sherman, who just published the article yesterday, How Uber Became a Cash-Generating Machine, and some insightful information there. Then we're going to be talking about Uber quietly took more of your fare with Upfront Fares. We see a pattern here. We're also going to be talking about driver earnings does driver earnings keep pace with vehicle ownership costs? Then we're going to be talking about New York City drivers are getting a bump in pay. Should we, as independent contractors, be able to set our own rates? And then we're going to be talking about trip radars now at airports. And then we're going to be talking about our Uber CMT scores as accurate as Uber says they are. And we're going to end with Tesla Robotaxis are now live in Austin, but with a little twist. So we got a good show for you coming up. And with that being said, let's get our guest on, Professor Len Sherman. Len, how you doing today?
Already. How are you guys?
Hello,
Fantastic.
Len. Welcome to Show Me the Money. I think this is your second or third. I don't know. I think it's your third.
I think second. You get to my age and it's tough to remember.
Yeah, it's all good. So, as you may know or not know, Len Sherman, professor at Columbia Business School, he has done multiple articles regarding Uber and their path to cash cow that they are these days. Some went viral, some went under the radar, but he's back. He's back with another article, being a pain in the ass to Uber. And so disclaimer, there is an official Uber comment that I'm going to read at the end of our interview, and I'm going to give Len a chance to respond to their comment. And so, Len, tell us about short, and then we'll dig deeper, obviously, in a minute or two. What is this about? First of all, how did you come about doing this? How did it all start? What did you do, right? And then why did you do it? And then lastly, how could this potentially help the driver community? So,
sure.
Floor is yours.
Well, let me start. Just thanks for having me. I actually, for real, I really enjoy being on your show, listening to your show. I learn a lot. I couldn't do what I do unless I kind of learned a lot from you guys. The last time you asked how many times I've been on the show, I just remember the one other time about 18 months ago. I had just then published an article suggesting that Uber's U.S. average take rate across the board and ride sharing was 40%. And Uber was not happy with that at all. So this isn't the first time I think we're going to cross swords, because as I'll share with your listeners today, at some point, based on my latest work, at least for some drivers Uber should want to treat fairly, the majority of trips that they're getting accepted by some of your power drivers that listen to your show, and maybe he's on, their average take rate is more like 50% now, when it's generating 80% of the profits they earn on the behalf of their drivers. So we'll obviously be crossing swords, and I'll be anxious to hear what Uber's reaction so far is, but I'll be happy to answer, give you my response to it. How did I get involved with this? I worked for a long time, over 30 years in management consulting, mostly to the worldwide automotive industry. So I've hung around cars all my life. I've been around the world talking to people in and around the car business. So it was kind of natural that I would be interested in Uber and its relationship to that industry. And now that I'm teaching at Columbia Business School, teach business strategy to a bunch of MBA students who pay a lot of money to go to school. I use a lot of cases, and every year their favorite case is Uber. And the reason is it's a hell of a story. I mean, it's a company that lost more money than any company, any startup ever. $32 billion, give or take a few million. And they've now turned into this money machine. Chris, you can throw up figure one, I think it is, just to give a quick picture of what I'm talking about. I mean, this doesn't happen very often. A company, A, that starts by losing as much money as they did, and then turns into this, as I call it, cash generating machine. Just one little detail, and then we'll move on from that. But you can see that pretty soon after Dara Khosrowshahi got hired as CEO, he started doing a bunch of really smart things and really started driving the company from 2019 when they went public on up through 2021, close to break even. But then they kind of stalled out. And, the effect of all the good things he was doing had their effect. And something changed somewhere in 2022, and that rocket ship took off again. So why did I do this research? Why I've been focused on the company for the last 3 years, trying to understand what the hell happened. And we'll talk about that today, sometime in 2022 to make this rocket ship take off. So you can get rid of this.
Okay. So I know we're going to go into much deeper than this. Can you, I don't think it's a coincidence, by the way, that where you had the red turn into small green and then boom, ridiculous, just through the roof kind of a green, happens to coincide with upfront fares, going from rate cards to upfront fares, pretty much nationwide with the exception of a few states. So just wanted to remind the community that when you do look at these graphs or screenshots, I know we're going to go a little faster than normal because there's a lot to discuss, but I highly, highly, highly recommend that you guys go check out. It's on Twitter. I tweeted it out yesterday, but as you guys can go to Medium, and under Len Sherman, this article in its full entirety, full length is there with all the screenshots, so you can take your time and take a look at all the data that Len uncovered. So continue, Len.
Sure. All right. So what did we find? Why I was trying to dig into this. What did we find? Just at a very high level and very quickly, definitive proof that the biggest driver of their immense profit turnaround in the last 3 years has been the implementation of upfront fares, upfront pricing, which I believe is the largest scale ever implementation of algorithmic price discrimination on both sides of their marketplace. In English, what does that mean? Price discrimination, it has nothing to do with gender, race, color. It's all about a company that figures out, using very smart algorithms, analytics, huge databases, what is the maximum price that customers are willing to pay for a product, and what's the minimum pay that a supplier of that product is willing to accept to provide that product. And if you could match those two together on every one of the 3 billion trips, give or take, that you deliver in the US on ride sharing every year, you're increasing that spread. Prices are going up and pay is going down. And I'll show you the definitive proof, as Sergio just referenced, what that actually looks like from the driver's perspective on hard data, lots of hard data on one particular driver that I'll mention. So we've definitively answered the question of what's really driven that cash generating profit machine, and it's the implementation of upfront pricing. But we've been able to kind of dig deeper and go, I think, further than most other studies that I'm aware of into trying to understand how does this algorithm work and what specific tactics does it allow Uber to apply to everyday drivers. For example, we found that on these forward dispatch trips, these are the trips where you get the ping where you still have a butt in the back seat and you know what your next ride is if you accept it, that Uber has been able to raise prices to riders for those trips, not share that price premium with drivers. What a surprise there. Therefore, increase their Uber's take rate on those trips, but delivering much worse service to riders. Why do I say that? Because you'll see data that shows that the wait time for that poor schmuck on the other side of that forward dispatch trip that didn't know it was a forward dispatch trip is now waiting 40 to 60% longer for that ride to arrive than the trips that just come through, the normal guys between rides accepting a ride.
Yep.
So, and also rider cancellation rates are a lot higher on those trips because they're getting tired of waiting. So you're charging riders more for worse service, and drivers are getting more cancellations, lower tips probably because you got pissed off riders, et cetera, et cetera. Another finding, pretty clear evidence that Uber is shaving the value of surge bonuses for drivers. Hey, they'll tell you, hey, there's a $3 surge in this trip. But what's going on behind the scenes is that they're lowering the base fare to which they added the surge, so that net, you're not really getting the full value of the surges they're telling you you're getting. A lot of your listeners, I know, have experienced this. I've seen screenshots on your show. Hey, look at this. This is crazy. Look how low my base fare was. But this is not a screenshot or two. This is thousands and thousands of trip records where we've been able to document exactly what Uber is paying, how big is the surge, and what does it mean for drivers. So anyway, I'll go through a bunch of those findings.
Can we take one step back real quick here?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, obviously you didn't do this by yourself, right? And whose data or what data was used? Okay.
Cool.
And who did the analysis of this? Because look, again, the Medium article is out there. Please go check it out. Please check it out. There's a lot more in there than we're going to be able to discuss due to time constraints today. But, this wasn't done by like a couple of high school students. Okay. So let's go into that. Whose data was used?
Yeah.
I think it was Uber's data, right? But you can tell us. And then who did the analysis of this?
All right. So, how do we know these things? I'm, making these summary of findings going a mile a minute here. How do we know these things? So, Uber makes a promise to all of its drivers, it's right on their corporate website, and riders, that says, hey, anyone who has used our platform, rider or driver, who would like it, just go through these simple steps. The steps are laid out on their website, and we will share with you your trip history. So with that as background, I started putting out the word to a bunch of drivers I know or know of, and they passed the word to others. And I started getting emails from drivers saying, hey, I'd be happy to help you out. I'll go ahead and request it and share it with you. And I said, great. And I collected a bunch of these trip histories, which I'll describe a little bit more in a second. But it's very important that I said there's one particular kind of driver. I'm not going to go over hundreds and hundreds of drivers. I want to look for one particular driver, because we're going to really dive really deep into what years and years of 31,000 trips can tell us. And the requirements I had is I want a driver who drove for at least 5 years. I want to get 2019, the year before COVID, and compare it to today and what's happened then versus now. I wanted the driver to always drive in the same city because there are different conditions in different cities. I wanted the driver to only drive for Uber and predominantly for UberX. We're only going to look at UberX. I don't want to get into reserve rides and Uber Premier and all that stuff. And I want someone with a high acceptance rate, and I want someone with an extremely low cancellation rate, and I want someone with a 4.9 or higher rating. The guy I chose met all those criteria. Okay. 4.99 rating. He got one non-5 on his last 500 trips. Good guy. This is the kind of driver. So you could say, well, why do you get to base all this stuff just on one driver? This is the kind of driver Uber should value. Everything I just said is exactly what Uber should be looking for in all their drivers. And they're going to bust their chops for 5 years on your platform, delivering great service to riders, accepting most of the trips you offer. Why wouldn't you value and want to take care of this guy? So let's see how this guy is done. And that's the deep dive we took. So I had two MBA students and myself poring over these data records. And I'll tell you that any driver listening today who wants to request their data, you get a lot of information in the dump that Uber gives you. You won't, trust me, you won't know what to do with it. It's really complicated. And I had two scary smart MBA students who are a lot better at math than I am, working for 8 months, poring over this data back and forth. We met weekly, many times a week. So anyway, a lot of work went into this with a lot of data. That's
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that you guys kind of reverse engineered the pricing algorithm?
that was the plan. We went as far as we could. I think we've gone
Okay.
farther than anyone else, but there are still some deep dark secrets we don't know
Okay.
because
Okay. All right.
that's
All right.
Uber's prerogative. So there you go.
Okay.
Okay. And then, the last thing you'd asked is, and what does this all mean to your audience, to
Yeah.
drivers on Uber's platform? Look, I'm not going to tell you anything that you didn't suspect, but I think hopefully by the end of this show, you'll know much more definitively that your hunches and what you've been experiencing is the real deal. It's happening because we have tons and tons of data to show that this is not just a one-off screenshot. This is what the world looks like for Uber drivers around.
Yeah. Well, in our world, Len, as we say it, what happens is that we do feel it as drivers, but we can't prove it, right?
Yeah. All
So
right.
this is proof. This is proof of what we've been feeling, experiencing from
Right.
the rate card to upfront fares, and so it's black and white. It's on paper. So
Yeah.
let's
All right.
get
So
into whatever you want to talk about.
What does it mean to you? What I would say is, I hope you'll get an appreciation that you are up against a company that has immense resources, huge analytic skills, the biggest database the world's ever seen in this sector. And they're deploying all of those capabilities for their benefit, not yours. Hey, I don't begrudge them. They should do that. But just be aware that they are not your friend. They are out there to cut the best deal they can on 3 billion rides a year. And you better be as shrewd and smart and use all the tools you can to try to level the playing field as best you can. Don't just blindly accept all the stuff that comes your way. That will not work well for you. It'll work great for them. And by all means, I've talked to the CEOs of all these decision support apps like Maximo and Solo and GigU and others. Use whatever tools you can get that you feel comfortable with, because you need all the help you can get. So that's basically what I'd say.
By the way, that's 3 billion trips a quarter, not a year. So.
Well, no, but in this country, I think you're referring.
Oh, in this country, okay, never mind. Yeah, because we, towards the end, once you go through your screenshots, we should also hit upon that there was a similar study done with much less depth, I would say, by Oxford College in UK. So we'll talk about that.
I'll mention that at the end.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Let's dig in. Let's go figure 3, Chris, and we'll take a look. Okay, so if I didn't show you that chart a minute ago that said something happened in the middle of 2022 that just took Uber's profitability off like a rocket ship, and you had to guess when that happened. Let me just describe what you're looking at for those of you who are in front of a screen or a phone and can see this, and I think it'll be pretty obvious when upfront pricing came into effect. So what I've shown here, the blue in the top chart, the blue line is the average price per mile that riders paid for the 24,000 trips that we used in this analysis, by month and year between 2019 and 2025. So as you can see, the blue line is the price per mile went up from the beginning to the end. But it's a different picture with what driver pay was. And this is this driver, 24,000 trips. What was his average pay per mile? And right around, I'll tell you when it was September 1st, 2022. And that was the day in his city, in that particular driver's city, that upfront fares kicked in. And guess what happened to driver pay? Down, down, down it went. And you can see the reverse spike on the bottom chart is Uber's take rate started climbing steadily starting on September 1st, 2022. So it's not rocket science. If you can raise prices and lower cost, i.e. pay, you're going to make a higher profit margin. And that certainly has been the case. All right. So by the way, just to give you a snapshot, roughly around that time when upfront fares kicked in, Uber's average take rate, at least for this driver, was about 32%. And by the end of this period, which, we took it out through February of this year, it was 10 percentage points higher. from 32% to 42%.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of companies that would damn near kill to get a 1 or 2% increase in their gross profit margin.
Yep.
And to achieve a 10 percentage point improvement is just like, it's a good thing.
Well, multiply that times 4 million drivers in the US.
Yeah, well, so now go to the next slide. What is this worth to Uber? It's allowed them to achieve what I call the trifecta of profit improvement. The trifecta, what does that mean? They're making much higher take rates on each trip, on higher price trips. The only thing better than having a higher margin is applying that higher margin to a higher price trip. And then on top of that, the other thing that we don't talk about as much about upfront pricing, but Uber talked about it when they very first introduced upfront pricing. They said, hey, we're going to rebalance. Remember that? We're going to rebalance prices. And what that means is we're going to raise prices on shorter trips and lower prices on longer trips. Why would they want to do that? Well, they would want to do that because the amount of money that Uber makes per trip on a long trip is way more than the amount of money they make on a short trip. Even with the lowering of prices for longer trips, the lowering of take rates on longer trips, they're making 2 to 3 times as much on a 10-mile trip than on a 3-mile trip. So the trifecta, higher take rates across the board, on average, higher price trips, more long trips. And we simply looked at what was the profit per trip that this driver, who's given 24,000 trips in our analysis, what was the average price per trip Uber made on him for his 2019 trips versus what they made on each of his trips in 2024. And the difference is in this last box on the upper right, it was about $1.30 per trip higher gross profit. Now, Chris, I've heard you say multiple times in the show over the years, with the kind of volume that Uber does, even if they could shave a nickel or a dime a trip, it adds up to real money. We're not talking nickels and dimes. We're talking about dollars, plural. So just total back of the envelope. I'm not pretending this is like the SEC audited perfect number. But if you just take kind of this guy's experience and say, if Uber's making on average $1.30 more per trip, and they give it around 3 billion US trips, that's worth about $4 billion. The same upfront pricing policy went into effect in London and in Frankfurt, Germany, and in Rio de Janeiro. And so, you take this across the world and this kind of profit improvement, and that's why we've come to the conclusion that the biggest driver of Uber's profit improvement over the last 3 years is this. This change was devilishly effective, but it's just as opaque as it is effective. So now the question is, how are they doing it and how does it actually work in practice? So let me catch my breath and we'll move to that section. All right. Why don't we put up the next slide? Now, I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. But I just wanted to give you a visual to see how important the change from the old pricing rules with rate cards were and how does it work today under upfront pricing. So what we did is we looked at, in this case, there were about 2,300 trips that this driver gave in 2019. And for each trip, we said, all right, what was the trip distance and what was the duration, the P3 time? And if there was a surge, how much was the surge? And then we just created this formula that said, okay, well, what the rider paid and what the driver was paid is a function of how long was the trip, how long did it take, and what was the amount of the surge. And we just run it through this analysis and out comes a prediction. We can predict, if you just give me those 3 things, what the price would be. And then we can compare our prediction to what they actually paid and what they actually paid the driver. Okay. So what I've shown on the left here is our prediction, just using a simple formula, distance, time, and surge. What was the driver pay versus the actual? And you can see it's just almost a perfect fit with 98% accuracy. You tell me the time, distance, and surge. I'll tell you what the rider paid, and I'll tell you what the driver was paid. it's math. And by the way, it should be no surprise. There was a rate card. There was a certain dollar per mile. There was a certain dollar per minute, and surges were strictly additive. There was a surge. We added to the price for the rider. We added to the pay for the driver. Done. So this is what we expected. This is what we got.
Okay.
Next chart. Now we go to 2024, and this time the guy has given 5,500 Uber X trips in 2024, and we just ran the same exact formula. All right, how well can we predict what the rider will pay and what the driver will be paid based on those three factors? Not very well. There's this big scatter. This is called a scatter plot, and there's just a wide variability. So if you look across the line, you look across the chart from left to right, for any given predicted price, you can see that the actual price or the actual pay varies considerably by 30, 40, 50% from what the average would be, which was what the predicted line would be. So this is just a visualization of how much flexibility Uber has gained through upfront pricing to charge actual prices and actual driver pay significantly different than would be implied by the old rate rules. Okay. All right. So what does that buy them? What does that mean? So go to the next chart. This is where it's going to get even more interesting. So in the top box, the top chart on this slide, I said back in 2019, that's the blue bars. Anything you see as blue is what happened in 2019. Back in 2019, 86% of every trip was within plus or minus 10% of the average for a trip of that distance, that duration, and whatever the surge was. And again, if you tell me what the price, pay, distance, time, and surge, 86% of the time, it's going to be very close to the predicted amount. In 2024, only 22% of all these trips, of all the 5,500 plus trips, only 22% were within that plus or minus 10% range. So it used to be very predictable pay, and that was the standard and that was the norm. And now the norm is variability. The norm is you're in a crapshoot. If you're a rider, God only knows what the price is going to be. If you're a driver, God only knows what the pay is going to be. Yep. The norm is there's going to be high variability. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the vast majority of trips are outside the kind of norm. So what are those exceptions? And I think there's three important exceptions to look at. And those are the three boxes you see in the bottom of this chart. The first is the cases where the rider paid at least 10% more than the average for trips of that distance and time and surge. The second is the driver was paid at least 10% below what the average would be for the basic trip characteristic. And the third is when you can do both. Wow, you can jack up the price and whack down the pay. All right. The first one, rider price premiums. On 22, that's the first red bar, 22% of the trips, I charged the rider at least 10% above what the average should be for trips of that time and duration and surge. But those trips are, price premium really valuable. The take rate on those trips is the second red bar is 49%. Whoa, that's a great take rate. Yep. And it represents 33% of the total profits that Uber made on this guy's 5,500 trips that year. So this is a great profit generator for Uber to be able to charge riders selectively higher prices as long as they're willing to pay. But as much as riders have donated to Uber's cause, drivers have given up more. Why do I say that? The second box, more than 1/3, 34% of every trip this guy gave paid him, these are trips he accepted, paid him 10% or more below what the average for trips of that distance, duration, and surge should be. So he's accepting a lot of trips that are paying lousy pay. And not surprisingly, the take rate on those trips is 50%. And it's generating 39, almost 40% of Uber's total profits. So you can see there's disproportionate amount of the overall profitability coming from either charging riders more, paying drivers less, and oh my gosh, what if we can do both? What about the trips where driver paid a ton and the rider got paid peanuts? And you guys have had tons of screenshots on the screen. Look at this crap, 70% take rate. This is awful. It makes for a great show. You guys have wonderful screenshots, but let's not kid ourselves. It's a small portion of the total. So it was only 4% of trips that fell in that kind of super extreme, but those are great trips. 57% average take rate, generating 7% of profits. Bottom line, 60% of this guy's trips charge riders at least 10% more, paid drivers at least 10% less, or both. And those 60% of trips generated a take rate of 50% and generated 80% of Uber's profits on behalf of what the trips this guy delivered. Yep. This is what upfront pricing does. It spreads that margin on a large number of trips and becomes the cash generating engine that Uber has now become. I couldn't say that more clearly than the numbers speaking for themselves.
Yep.
Okay. Lastly, and then we can see what Uber thinks about all this great stuff. So let's go to, what do I have now? Oh, yeah. Well, let's dig into two specific examples. And every driver on this program can relate to the two last analyses I'll share with you. So let's go to the next slide, Chris. So let's dig into these forward dispatch trips that I mentioned earlier. And again, these are trips where you still got a paying passenger in the seat, and ping, up comes the next trip request, and you've got 10 seconds, whatever, to accept it. You accept it, and off you go. Okay. I actually took two different driver trip histories for this analysis. They were in two different states. They're different driving patterns. But the first thing that struck us when we dug into just how many of their trips were forward dispatches. Wow, these things happen often. So the first driver, the red bar is the red bar is the percentage of total trips that are forward dispatch. The first guy was about 40%, and the second guy was about 60% of his trips were forward dispatch. Maybe these are unusually high, but this is what's happening. Okay. Let's just focus on the 60% case. So these are great trips for riders in one sense. If you're a rider and you request a trip and Uber can figure out, hey, we got an en route driver, let's shoot him real quick, shoot him a forward dispatch request. He accepts it, and within seconds, the rider says, hey, we got a match for you. And I think riders would find that terrific and get such a quick confirmation of a match. And if that's the reason, or for whatever reason, Uber is charging riders a higher price per mile on the forward dispatch trips than on the non-forward dispatch trips. So look at the second box on the top. The driver two, the one who did 60% of his trips forward dispatch, riders were paying $4.08 per mile for those forward dispatch trips versus $3.67 for the normal trips.
Can I just mention one thing, that the rider has no idea when they order a trip if this is a forward dispatch trip or it's just a regular trip, correct?
Yeah, as far as let's put it this way, I've never seen it on my rider.
I haven't either. So as a rider, I haven't seen it either. Yeah.
But okay. I'll tell you what, I'll show you in a second that riders can figure it out.
Okay.
Sort of.
Oh,
all right.
okay.
So the Uber's in a position, because they can give such a quick match, to extract a higher price from riders. How much do you think they share with drivers? That price premium for the surprise, for driver one, there was no difference between forward dispatch and non, and for the second driver, a small difference. So basically, if you can extract a higher price from your riders but not have to pay your drivers very much, guess what happens to Uber's take rate? And that's what the fourth box, the first one on the lower left, says, that for both drivers, the take rate Uber earns on forward dispatch trips are higher than, quote, normal trips.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what does this all mean? drivers are paying more, but getting worse service. Why do I say that? Because the one that just blew us away, this knocked us off our chair when we saw the results, is the fifth panel in this chart. What's the average wait time for riders who, as Sergio said, have no idea that the trip is or is not a forward dispatch? But on the trips that were forward dispatch, the average rider wait time was 40 to 60% higher than the trips that were assigned on a quote normal basis. And not surprisingly, on the sixth and last panel on this chart is the rider cancellation rate. What percent of all trips that this driver accepted, or these two drivers accepted, that the rider canceled were forward dispatch versus not forward dispatch? So again, let's focus on driver two. 8% of his, 10% of his trips were canceled by riders overall. And 4 times as many of those cancellations were on forward dispatch trips as non-forward dispatch trips. So you're charging riders more for worse service, generating higher cancellation rates. The driver's not getting much benefit from it, and usually is winding up with a pissed off passenger. For all I know, is tipping less too. I didn't look into that. The house always wins. Uber is winning at the expense of riders and drivers in this case.
Yep.
2 cases, actually. Last one. Let's go to the last deep dive analysis. Surge trips. Surges, as we all know, have been with us and Uber from the beginning. It was one of their great early innovations to figure out that they could use surge pricing to balance times of day where there was a supply-demand imbalance. But the rules in the old days used to be pretty straightforward. If there was a surge, we know what the base price would be in the old days. It was right off the rate card. And if there was a surge, let's say it was a $3 surge, you added the $3 to the driver's base pay, and you added the same $3 to the rider's price. Very simple, predictable, knowable. All right, so we looked at back to the one driver I've used for much of this analysis. What was his experience with surges since upfront fares came into being? So what we did is we looked at 2022 up to the point in 2022 where upfront fares were implemented, and then compared it to 2024. What was the frequency and value of surges? So the first thing you notice is that the frequency with which Uber offers drivers a surge has dramatically decreased. And you all know that. You guys have experienced it yourselves. I'm sure this guy is not the one exception. Not only are the frequency that surges were offered of any size, but the value of the surge has also come way down. So it used to be in 2022 that the average surge value per time a surge was applied was over $4. And in 2024, now with upfront pricing, it's only $2.49. And I think what Uber has figured out is they don't need a surge to decide that they can raise prices for passengers or pay drivers whatever they want. So they just are less reliant on surges. They're less frequent, and they're less. There's lower values. Okay, but here's the really interesting thing, and I think the thing that's maybe kind of annoying to a lot of drivers. Not only is our surges now less frequent and less valuable, but Uber is shaving the value of the actual pay that drivers get on surge trips. That is, they're not paying the full value. Why do I say that? Well, we looked at the total price that a driver was paid in 2024 with and without a surge. And what we discovered is rather than just adding the same surge value to both what the rider paid and the driver was paid, Uber was really jacking up the price. So when you say to a driver, hey, there's a $3 surge, the rider was being charged on average 68% more than that $3, whatever that would be, $4, $6 or $7. And the driver was being paid less than the full value of the surge because Uber was shaving the base price to which the surge was added. Yep. So the combination of this is that Uber's take rate on surges went from 29% in 2020, early 2022, very low amount, lower than non-surge trips, to 44%, 15 percentage point increase. You only can get that if you are jacking up the price on top of surges for what riders pay and shaving the value of the price that drivers are paid for the surge. And you put those two together, and in the last box, it shows how much Uber's gross profit per surge trip was and now is. 2022, on trips that had a surge, Uber on average made $4.25 on all of those surge trips in 2022, and in 2024 on surge trips they were making $8.66. If ever there was a case that you're jacking up prices here and shaving pay there, surges is your animal. So there you go.
Yep. So well, Len, thank you for breaking it all down, but there's a lot more in the article.
Yep.
Let's quickly touch upon the Oxford College's not findings, but there was an article which I tweeted out, which was by The Guardian. FYI, folks, this is not something that I usually do, but this is Len's findings are going to get picked up by mainstream media shortly. So I will tweet those out and we'll post those on our channel as well by major news outlets. So, we thank our friends in the journalist community to pay attention to this, obviously. And so let's quickly talk about what the Oxford College in UK found out of 247 drivers and millions of data points that they looked at, although they did not go as deep as you did, or they did not try to reverse engineer the algorithm, the pricing algorithm, because the drivers in the UK went to court to get the right for Uber to provide their own data. Basically, the way I'm looking at this, Len, is that they have our data, they have deep machine learning, they have AI, they have all these tools. They are using our own data against us, actually. That's what is happening here. And so they did do the analysis, and the analysis concluded pretty much the same thing that you came up with.
Yeah, I want to stress this was, thank you for tweeting that, because I wasn't aware. Actually, I had a driver text me, and then I saw your tweet. And the honest truth is I had no idea that Oxford University was conducting their study and has been working hard at this over the same period of time, long time that I have. Nor were they familiar with what I did. The source of data was the same, that in both cases, they and I used trip history data on drivers. I only had a handful of drivers. As Sergio, you just said, I think they had 250 some odd.
Yeah.
So they had extensive thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of trips over, many more drivers than I had. At a broad level, they came out with exactly the same findings that I did. If you remember that very first chart, which showed that from the instant that upfront pricing was introduced in the UK, here, both rider pay went up, driver pay went down, take rate went up. And it's just clearly attributable to the instant in time that upfront pricing came in. So there you go. I went a little more into depth, like the two analysis we just talked about on forward dispatch trips and surge pricing. But at a very broad level, they got exactly the same findings as we did. So there you go.
Okay. Yeah. It was I don't think it was a coincidence. I think the findings were extremely similar, actually, to what you came up with.
Yep.
So this is the time. I don't want to get your blood pressure up, Len. Okay. So don't. I got to read you.
I just have juice. I don't have a beer, but
okay. I gotta read you Uber's official statement that was sent to me. So here it goes. And I will give you a chance to respond to this. And then we'll conclude with, is this a one and done deal? And what could
Yep.
drivers learn about all of this, right?
Yeah.
Because, I think there is a fine line here to understand. Anyway, so here's Uber's official statement. Mr. Sherman's claims are wildly misleading based on just one driver's story and a lot of leaps. No one knows better than the rideshare guy audience. Now, I don't know why they put that in there. The rideshare guy audience, that there are more than 8 million drivers and delivery people using Uber, many who make their data public. And yet, Sherman chose to base his findings on the story of just one. The idea that upfront pricing is some secret playbook for deception is fiction, not fact. Uber's pricing is about giving both sides of the marketplace transparency, not hiding the ball. Okay, so that was their statement. And I told them, I promised them, I read them. And so you can respond for a minute or so.
So I guess they didn't like the report.
I guess.
I'll tell you, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I think. It really doesn't. It matters a lot more what your listeners think. It matters what state legislatures think. It matters what the Federal Trade Commission thinks, all of whom now have my report, all of whom have, and I've forwarded to them since I learned about it literally yesterday, the Oxford University reports. And, the folks can decide for themselves. What was the term they used? Wildly misleading storytelling. Folks can decide for themselves whether what I've tried to share today is wildly misleading and storytelling, and in conjunction with similar research projects that used more feedback, more driver input than I had, or not. Look, there's very good reasons for Uber to not want to be forthright and clear in sharing with us, the audience, and all the constituencies I just mentioned, what the real deal is with their business operations. Look, workers want to feel valued and that they're getting a square deal. Riders, customers don't like to feel like they're being taken advantage of. And Uber's doing exactly that millions of times a day. They're not valuing their drivers, and they're taking advantage of customers in the pricing policies they put in place. And I don't blame them for not wanting to make that terribly clear and explicit. But when they come out with these kinds of criticisms of my study, of the Oxford University study, and in the past, I've had the same thing happen every time I've tried to dig into their business practices. They come out with these, attack dog, wildly misleading. What did they say the last time? Our take rate is nowhere near 40%. You are profoundly wrong, or something to that effect. But notice that they never back up these critiques with hard data. I mean, I can only dream of having access to the kind of data and extent of data that Uber has. So if you think I've overstated take rates, if you think I've overstated, show us the money. Put your money where your mouth is. Tell us exactly what your trend line has been in U.S. rideshare take rates from 2019 to 2025. I want to see it. I've done the best damn job I can showing you what I think it is based on as much data as I can get my hands on. If you think that is profoundly, wildly, misleadingly wrong, put your money where your mouth is. Put the data out there. Put it out there. If you are not shaving surge bonuses, do the same analysis I did on millions of drivers, not just the handful I had. Look, you guys could have irrefutable proof that everything I've said is wildly, misleadingly wrong. Put it out there. I would love to hear it. I would love to learn the drivers are getting a better deal than I think they are.
Yeah. Well, I think
they won't do it. And it's a good reason they won't.
Well, obviously, and I read their response to the Oxford report as well. It's pretty similar, although not as scathing as yours. But I think yours went deeper. That's why I think they just chose to do it
Well,
that
they
way.
said, I read it, and said they didn't recognize. We don't even recognize what data. What data? We don't even recognize what data you're
Okay.
using. It's Uber's
So,
data. It's
so
Uber's
for a
data.
few hundred of you who are here, and for thousands that are going to watch this later, we will put some screenshots of. Actually, Len has a pretty simple, letter of how to access your own data. In certain states, it's your legal right to access your data. For example, California. In some states, it may not be. I don't know, but we'll dig into that. And so, is this a one and done, Len? Are you done with this, or do you want more data? Because now you're going to have 1,000 people willing to share their data with you.
Let me get back to that. I got some trauma coming up. You got my blood pressure up.
I have a life. Len goes, I have a life. Okay. All right. Okay. Ron is just not pushing you. Not pushing you. We can't lose you. So, well, I don't know. I'll give you the floor, man. I'll give you the floor for the next 1 minute. You know, I thank you for what you do for the driver community. You've been a great friend to the show and to the channel, to me personally, and Chris, obviously, and to all the drivers, around the globe, not just the US. And I think what you say has weight. And yeah, I'm just going to give you the floor, and you close this segment up.
Okay. Well, I didn't prepare a closing
You don't
statement.
have to. From the heart, Len. From the heart.
Let me just close with a couple of thoughts that I've been thinking a lot about, not just about Uber, but a lot of companies in general. And it's what I believe is the importance for any company, particularly a company in a service business. And that's what Uber is. It's delivering a service, a very valuable service. 100 million people, frequent users around the world. It's a great service. But I think a service-based company in particular needs to develop the trust of its customers and employees or workers, call it what you will. And to be very frank and blunt, I believe Uber CEO has gotten some very bad advice in the sense that the company's reaction, which you just shared with us, to my work, but to anyone's work, is this attack dog, we're right, they're completely wrong. And nothing that I've heard today, and again, it doesn't matter what I think, it's what your audience thinks, would instill credibility and trust if I were on the receiving end of that. And you could ask your drivers, and they kind of sit there with their text box going, now, do you trust this company to treat you fair and square, be straightforward and honest with you, and be candid with you, and not take advantage of you? And I believe they have lost the trust of the driver community and a lot of folks in the rider community as well. And that, in the long run, is not a good way to run a business, in my humble opinion.
Okay. Well, here's Professor, please don't say Len, Professor Len Sherman from Columbia Business School. My hat's off to you, sir.
Thank you.
Keep him coming. Keep the pressure on. And you're always welcome here, obviously. So great job. Thank you for doing this. And our audience appreciate it. And I appreciate it personally. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
show.
All right. Thanks. All right. So that was Professor Len Sherman going over his article. Again, link is going to be in the description so you can actually check out the entire article in its full. Going to break down a lot more than what we had just talked about. But one of the things is I saw somebody comment, I don't remember when or where, but they said, what does it mean for us? Or this is what we've known for 2 years talking about this. You're right. Sergio and I have been putting things out there that you guys have been giving us, that you guys have been feeding us, that we have been seeing as well too. And we're putting it out there with our theories. Len put it out there with the proof. So now it's confirmed. And then the question is, what do you do about it? Well, we had our theories. We've talked about this. There's different things. These forward dispatch trips. That means stop new requests. Hit the stop new request button on Uber and Lyft. So then that way you don't get these forward dispatch trips. So the passenger isn't going to be pissed off. The driver isn't going to be getting screwed. And then that's more of a win-win, because if there's less drivers on the road, there's more chances of actually getting some sort of surge. Whether that's a good thing or not, that's, built into the upfront fare system. So everything we've been talking about, is just kind of backed up now with some actual hard evidence. Whether you choose to accept that or not, that's your game. Uber clearly has a different opinion, but we've been talking about it for 2 years. We've been seeing it in their earnings reports, quarter after quarter after quarter, what's going on. And yeah, so with that being said, use the tools that you have available to you. Stop new requests is a big thing as well too. Paying attention to what rides are coming in, accepting everything probably will not work in your area. In certain markets, it absolutely will. Donnie, if you're here, he accepts everything, 100% acceptance rate, and it works for him. It works in his market in Biloxi. It does not work in most areas or most people. So you have to now look at the costs of your vehicle, and you have to weigh it against, is this profitable for you or not? Unfortunately, it's only 10 seconds, but if you know those costs, if you can figure out a little bit of quick math, you'll know if that ride is worth it or not. If it goes unclaimed for X amount of time, so be it. That's on them. That's their problem, not yours as a driver. You choose what's profitable for you. Don't take the crap that's not profitable. Other than that,
Yeah.
Sergio, what do you got to say?
No, I agree with you 1,000,000%, and that's what the aim of this show has been for the last 3+ years, is that, know your worth and decline garbage, and decline and recline. And I think some of these apps, third-party apps, which we're going to talk about in a minute regarding Lyft, because I have some news there which I couldn't squeeze in screenshots because I don't have any, but you have to be profitable. And we'll have a segment coming up. Have your earnings kept pace with inflation on your vehicle costs? And we'll talk about that shortly. But you got to resist the temptation, because not only the trip, the $3-4 trip that's unprofitable, is costing you money, but it's also costing you, and I trade stocks, there's something called opportunity cost. And don't be like a hummingbird jumping from flower to flower trying to suck nectar. Just focus on one thing and do that one thing really, really well. The opportunity cost that you're losing while you're on a $3 trip, you may be getting that banger. So to us, the key is, we say this here all the time, work smart, not hard. There are tools now such as GigU and Maximo to make your life safer and to get to your goals faster, earnings goals, by increasing your earnings, and use those tools. And the companies are obviously going to say what they're going to say. They have been saying this, and I couldn't agree with Len more. At the end, show us the data. Give us the data. There is none of it. None of it is based on anything else other than, we're Uber, trust us. We don't. Sorry. That's it.
Yep. All right. If you like that breakdown and then just kind of the proof, and you haven't been crazy, Uber may have been gaslighting you by saying, oh, earnings are up and drivers are making more money. And if you feel the gaslight, but now you feel kind of vindicated because you knew that things were not right, that passengers were paying more, you were getting paid less, surges less, all of that good stuff, everything we've been saying, make sure you smash that like button too, and tell Uber to F off.
Every
It's
time
Uber's turn this week. Last week it was Lyft's turn. This week it was Uber's turn. But on the flip side, I know you have a couple of things from Lyft that they have. So that smashing the FU to Lyft, the like last week, I think it worked because there's some news coming from Lyft. So again, if you want to give Uber the big FU this time, smash that like button. Every single like that you put on this is one FU to Uber.
Yeah. Well,
all right. So what did Lyft?
So real quick, I spoke to Jeremy Bird today. I've been tweeting about this, and actually Chris, I think, tweeted one, and then I kind of retweeted his tweet. We're both on Twitter. It's in the show notes. Please go follow us, for fuck's sake. And F you, Uber. There you go. Like, somebody put a like immediately. So I talked to Jeremy about two things. As you guys know, we had a segment last week. Obviously, Lyft watched it and said, wait a minute, what's happening? It was regarding threats of deactivation for using third-party apps. A lot of you got emails saying if you're using third-party apps, you could get deactivated according to the terms of service or community guidelines, whatever. And so I spoke to Jeremy. He clarified that. He said unequivocally they are not against drivers using third-party apps such as GigU, Maximo, Solo, Gridwise. However, he says a lot of drivers have been complaining, specifically at airports, and that there is third-party apps who they're charging their drivers to grab these trips. I've known about this for a long time. This has been going on for a while. There are bots out there that grab these trips from either Trip Radar, Trip Finder, or in the queue at airports, or reserve trips. Lyft is against those third-party apps which imbalance the marketplace and disadvantage the driver. There are apps out there that go into scheduled trips on Lyft and grab the most lucrative ones and leave the shit out there. They are against those third-party apps. So he clarified this. Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate it. And so there is no, and I said, why do you guys send out this ridiculous threat? They go, well, that's the coders, the IT department, the engineers do that. I go, well, engineers are good at engineering. PR is good at talking and writing. Engineers, nerds, should not be writing that there's a threat of deactivation for using third-party apps, and we were kind of chuckling about it. That's one. Number two, as you all know, for as long as I can remember, there are caps on Lyft's case of $300 on extra super long trips. Like we showed some screenshots last week, to 600 miles for $300 because there's a cap of $300. David is aware of it. David told Jeremy, please, let's take a look into this. So they are looking into this. Again, Lyft is listening and trying to be proactive and doing things. Why would Jeremy call me? Why? He feels he's listening. So I will keep you guys posted on what's going to come down the road, specifically on these two issues. But don't worry about the deactivation threat regarding third-party apps. Use your third-party apps to your heart's content. But if you're using a bot that is grabbing trips illegally from other drivers, be on the lookout. They will deactivate you for that. That's one. Two, hopefully we're going to raise the cap on these super long trips. And that's going to be another victory for the driver community. So that's the news I have. Hats off to Lyft. Thank you. And that's it.
Well, I'm glad because that's a couple of things we were talking about the last couple of weeks. So Lyft, I got to give you a little commend there. Now the other thing that we got to work on.
We take the FUs back.
Why am I still blocked, Mr. Risher? Why am I still blocked on X?
That buddy, that's like deactivations. I cannot help you with that one. I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Well, you've been watching the show. You can unblock me. I'm not going to tweet at you unless it's something like, what is going on here? Why is this? Can we get some sort of response or make you aware of something? I'm not some of the people that are like, hey, screw you or something like that. No, that's not my game. My game is just to bring awareness and drive conversation.
This is a hard place and a rock, buddy. I don't know. So I give up. Anyway.
Well, either way, David Risher, please unblock me from X. Either way, and good thing, I'm glad to hear that they're looking at these driver caps because I continue to see more and more of them. There was one I was going to tweet out, but I didn't. If I come across it, I will. It was a ride that came in for $360, and it had it was like a $68 bonus or something like that. And it was 518 miles.
Yeah.
Huh?
20% turbo probably, because that's the only way it goes above 300. There is a surge or bonus.
Well, it's whenever there's some sort of bonus that's attached to it, whether it's surge or includes X bonus or whatever. That's the only way it goes above that cap. But the actual fare cap itself is at $300. So I'm very glad to hear that they are doing that. And then obviously, as Len had mentioned earlier, use these tools that are available to you. Whatever is best for you, try them, see what you like, and see what works best for you, or use multiple ones if necessary. And that is the third-party apps. So these third-party apps, Solo, Gridwise, GigU, all the ones we've been talking about and had people on talking about them as well, because it's their apps. It's great resource, it's great information, and it's great to help you be able to earn more. And I'm glad to hear that they are not against those types of apps, so you do not have to worry about some sort of deactivation. But if you have a bot grabber, that is where you're going to have a little bit of a problem. So just be wary on that.
The quote, his specific quote was, if they F up the marketplace, meaning stealing chips from drivers. Okay, if you're an elite driver, you should have access to all the beautiful scheduled trips. But if there's an app that's grabbing all these scheduled trips, he goes, that's not fair. We're going to go after those. And he said, the language, Lyft has this problem, by the way, communication problem, as good as they are in communicating in some levels. So Jeremy, don't have those nerds, engineers write these emails that are threatening emails that are going out. Okay. Because, we get all antsy as drivers. We get upset that, what's happening. Right. So anyway, but I'm glad, hopefully we'll have a resolution on both issues. Well, we have a resolution on one. Use the third-party apps. No worry about it. But the cap, I think, would be also a good thing to remove from after a decade or something.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. With that being said, let's move on to our next topic, and that is kind of the topic of the show. Uber is quietly taking more of your fare with Upfront Fares.
Well, this is the exact thing that I tweeted out. This was 3-4 days ago. Oxford University, which is pretty similar, I would call, to Columbia, right? Ivy League in the UK.
I would say they're very, very similar.
Yeah, in the UK, they did a study with 247 drivers, 1.8 million data chips, and their conclusion was that the drivers should have made an extra $1.6 billion that they didn't do in 2024 because of after Upfront Fares showed up. And Len's number on the back of the envelope was $4 billion. So that's $5.6 billion that went into Uber, and that's why the stock went from 25. It's no coincidence, people. Go look at an Uber stock chart. The week Upfront Fares started, stock was 23. I remember it like yesterday. Today we're at 90. Okay, there you go. Proof is in the pudding. I don't know what Uber cries about their success. I've told them that. I go, you guys should be running around your offices and high-fiving each other saying victory. I don't know. They go like, oh, we're so ashamed that we're making money. We're a profitable $180 billion company. So why are you guys so embarrassed?
You're not spending $200,000 on balloons anymore.
I mean, what the frick? Why are you guys so embarrassed of making money? Yeah, I mean, you're doing it on the back of the driver. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Maybe you just don't feel good. You guys can't sleep well at night. That's why the problem is probably. But anyway, if you guys have any conscience, anyway. So Oxford did the same thing. Literally, you guys can go check it out. It's on my tweets. Identical results as Len's. And Len's was a lot deeper, by the way. Len's article is a lot deeper. Upfront Fares has made Uber a cash cow.
Yeah, well, what's nice is Lens went deeper into specific cases to kind of extract that data, while this one had more data points to choose from. So if they're going across the same thing, two different studies at two different times with multiple different drivers, well, you know what? You can make some assumptions out of that and then saying, oh, those are all edge cases. Sorry, that's probably more the reality of things. You just don't want to admit it. And that's why you have to use tactics like saying wildly misleading or false news or whatever they want to come up with, instead of actually putting out the real data, the real something to back up saying, well, X, Y, and Z. And they don't do that. So if they just want to continue gaslighting, then go for it.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, look, my background is in finance. Their trip growth has not been they always say, oh, we're just making 20%. We're happy with making 20%. You can't be making, that's fuzzy math. You can't be making 20% and your free cash flow goes through the roof. There's only one way. It's like one Lens study proved. You charge a lot more with elasticity as much as you can. You pay as little as you can. That's when free cash flow started skyrocketing, which happened to coincide with Upfront Fares, because your trip growth is at single digits, Uber. Yes, you're doing more trips, but it's not enough for your take rate with a 20% take rate. FYI, Uber, breaking news still, on your last earnings report, you always put the global take rate. And on the last quarter, okay, the number was there. On this quarter, the past quarter, the global take rate number was not there. And let me give you breaking news, folks. That global take rate was single digits 6 years ago, which I understand because it was at the growth level, right? Growth at any cost. They were just building the marketplace. That number went from single digits to 29%. It's on their earnings report. I'm not saying that's anything not public, so don't get pissed off, Uber. But on the last one, I couldn't find it. I asked Len, I go, what did they do? Did they omit that the global take rate number? He goes, yeah, it's not there. I'm like, hey, why isn't it there? Is it a secret thing? Is it hidden somewhere? Please let me know, Uber, where it is. So I can go
excuse me. You got to stop talking about that. That's called trade secret.
Huh? Oh.
Otherwise, the money truck goes away.
Take a screenshot of that. Assassinate Serge.
Money truck is backing away. Damn it, Sergio.
Mother trucker Serge.
All right, and then you got this email as well too, talking about.
It kind of coincides with all of this. He goes, "Hi Sergio, this is I respect this driver. He's from Texas, and he drives mostly upper platforms." So he goes, "Hi Sergio, no surprise, Uber has now perfected its algorithmic control. Until about 2 weeks ago, there were still ways to nudge the system, sporadic ride queue visits to the airport, reinstalling the app, resetting memory, or toggling settings often. This is all Fight Club shit, buddy. Toggling settings often trigger trip radar activity or ride offers. FYI, I personally have not had any conventional ride request out of the airport for over 6 months." Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. None of those tactics work anymore. What we're consistently seeing now, long gaps between ride requests, teaser trip radar, high value pings, low paying priority, which those trip radars are getting grabbed by bots anyway, and flood of underpriced reservations. At this point, most of us have stopped even turning the app on. Drivers who previously earned $1,500 to $3,000 per week on Uber Black. See, this is upper platform, and you guys think it's all, roses and, whatever, are now struggling to make $500 a week. Something fundamental has shifted. It's all tease and no substance. Ghost trip radar offers lowball priority requests and an increase in customer ride cancellations, which that's what Len said. So we no longer know how to play the game because it no longer feels like driving for a transportation platform. It feels like gambling on a rigged casino. Uber should be reclassified as an online casino, not a logistics or transportation company, which they say they're not. They're an IT company, they say, technology company. We wager our time. This is a great sentence, folks. Listen to this. We wager our time, vehicle, and fuel costs. Occasionally, we get rewarded with a real fare, just enough to keep us engaged. But most of the time, we're baited with seemingly lucrative rides we never actually receive. This isn't rideshare anymore. It's algorithmic exploitation disguised as an opportunity for reward. I love this letter, and that's why I read it. And we're done with this. So can we end the show here? I think that was pretty good.
Well, there's more to talk about, but well, either way, yes, that does hit the nail on the head.
Look at this one. Look at this one. Look at this. You're gonna like this one. Hold on. Hold on. This has been the most intense show in a while. You've been missing all our shows. All our shows are pretty intense, bro.
Last week got a little heated.
Last week got a lot. Yes.
Last week got a lot of heated. Either way, you can check that out after the show. Though that driver.
Any second, Chris, my brake lines are going to be cut. Any second, I expect when I'm taking my son to soccer practice today, I think my brake lines are going to get cut.
That's why you have an e-brake, so it'll it'll clamp down.
What are we doing here, man?
But let me tell you, that driver hit it on the head, but he did make a little mistake, and you did correct it by saying a transportation platform. They're not. Yeah. You're right. They're IT, and they've perfected the IT, and whether you want to admit it or not, they did it, and unfortunately, it's something that we all have to forward the brunt on.
Man versus machine. There you go. All right, let's go.
All right. With that being said, let's move on. Talking about driver earnings. are they keeping pace with vehicle ownership costs?
Okay, I'm going to plug our newsletter here. Listen, folks, I've been writing for RSG for over 6 years. Chris, those 2 articles went out this week. They may have been the best 2 articles I've ever written. I liked it. I don't know. So I talk about this subject, average cost of owning and operating an automobile. And because there was some comment saying that, our costs have gone up. Look at this. Look at the orange graph, orange line, orange chart, folks. Going from 2000 to 2024. This is just for 15,000 miles a year, by the way, Chris. Okay. That's like 3 months of work for a full-time Uber driver. So your costs are going to be worse. And I wrote an article about this, and I wrote an article about the human cost of driving for Uber, not just financial, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. I swear to God, if you guys don't go subscribe to the newsletter and read those goddamn articles, it's free. I don't know. I may just throw a shit. I'm telling you guys, those 2, this one with the cost analysis, much deeper, the article and the other one are going to probably drop this week. Please go subscribe just to read those 2 articles. Just subscribe to the newsletter. And the costs have gone up. So from 2000, Chris, from about 7,200, now we're at 12,000. This is just for 15,000 miles a year. And that's about double and a half-ish, somewhere in that range. And if you divide that by 24, which is 24 years, it comes to about 6 or 7% per year vehicle cost inflation. But specifically, I want you guys to get the little right side of the chart. What has happened since 2020, 2021? You guys see that huge leg up. Costs, vehicle maintenance and operating costs have taken up. Well, are your earnings keeping pace with that? Just this. Just your vehicle operating cost inflation. We're not talking about your rent. We're not talking about your, insurance. We're not talking about your food cost. We're not talking about any of the personal shit. We're just talking about running vehicle costs have skyrocketed. And on the next slide, we can look at what has happened to insurance rates. And here it is, folks. Look at this and read them and weep. This is by Creative Planning, U.S. auto insurance rates, 5-year percentage change. Well, you guys are paying for it because without having insurance, you can't get on the platform. You have to upload those insurance forms. And look where we are. So, question is that, though, have your earnings kept pace? Basically, what I'm trying to say is you had to earn about 6 to 10% more each year since 2019 just to keep pace with these cost increases. Not more profit, just to keep pace. According to Len, you're making, and grid-wise, you're making 20% less, not 50% more, because about 10% a year for 5 years is 50%. So Uber, Lyft, wake the F up. There's a revolution. This is bullshit. Why don't you write a blog about this? Why don't you guys disagree with this? Huh? Why don't you do that? Let me see your blog. Write it, say this is, what is this, misleading hearsay or whatever. Why don't you guys write about this? Why don't you guys educate your drivers that your vehicle operating inflation has gone through the roof, but we're not going to pay you more anyway. In fact, we're going to pay you less under Upfront Fares. Why don't you guys write about this? Huh? I don't see a blog about that, but I did. And I'm going to send it to you guys once the article comes out. Hope you guys read it. There you go.
Sergio, you're being wildly misleading and
fuck off.
accusing Uber and Lyft of paying drivers less. Well, we all know that drivers are earning more.
I'm hot already, so don't get me hotter.
Okay. No, so in other words, yeah, you got to pay attention to that. I actually posted something about the costs of a car and, the cost per mile. And, it kind of encompasses a lot of things. So depreciation, insurance, all of these things. So you know exactly what it is per mile. And they're like some of the best on the market right now. And that's talking about, a Tesla Model 3, a Toyota Corolla, these types of vehicles. And they're like at the 66 to 80 cent a mile range. Are you making 66 to 80 cents a mile range when you are driving Uber or Lyft? Because if not, you might be underwater and you just don't know it yet because you're trading your inflation for actual money. So you really got to make sure you figure out your costs when you're driving.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, man. I think it's a farce. I think it's a tragedy, that more people are doing this out of just trying to close the holes in their budget, because their budgets are like Swiss cheese, so many holes in their budgets. But they drive, they must. And Uber says, and the Lyft too, they say, oh, more hours on the platform than ever. Yeah, they have to make ends meet, and they have to in order to make the same amount of money they did 4 years ago. They have to. And you, Uber and Lyft, say, oh, drivers are making $30 per active hour, which is bullshit, meaningless lumber, because at 50% utilization. And on the other hand, you're boasting about having 8 million drivers on the platform, Uber. Okay? So what does that mean? If you have more drivers, that means utilization rates are lower. Who gives a shit if I earn $30 an hour active if my utilization is down to 50% because there's 8 Ubers at every corner of Los Angeles? Let's talk shit. Come here. Come on the show. Talk to me. Huh? You want. I know you want. That's why I just do this.
Yep. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about New York City drivers are getting a bump in pay, but I don't think it's as much as the costs associated with the rise of what you need to just in order to maintain your vehicle.
Well, yeah, they were asking for a lot higher bump, but they got 5%. I mean, it's better than most places. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so New York City has announced new minimum pay rules for rideshare drivers, setting on 5% increase following pushback from Uber and Lyft. Surprisingly, the rules are designed to deter Uber and Lyft from locking gig workers out, which we know that was a big problem last year, right? And I'm still stuck on the last subject, bro. Can you fucking do this? Because seriously, like my mind is like going like nuts.
Well, you know what? Go grab a little drink or something, and
bro,
go take a little
off,
puff.
man.
I don't know. Take the edge off. But yeah, it says the rules are designed to deter Uber and Lyft from locking gig workers out of their apps in attempts to keep costs down, and will require the companies to give 72-hour notice to drivers if they intend to lock them out. So that was a big problem. Like we said last year, the year before, because they had they had certain requirements that you had to be on and give so many rides and all this. The revised rules will no longer automatically update driver pay rates annually based on utilization rates, and will instead allow for adjustments through a rulemaking process that includes stakeholder feedback. And then New York City on Friday announced new minimum pay rules for rideshare drivers, settling on a smaller than proposed 5% increase following pushback from Uber and Lyft, as an earlier proposal called for a 6.1% pay boost. You couldn't give them the extra 1.1%. Come on. They finalized on top of that, you're talking about New York City. You want to talk about costs that go up? New York City's costs are insane compared. They were before, and now they're going up even more. So an earlier proposal called for the 6.1 pay boost. The finalized regulation from the city's TLC commission, that are also designed to deter Uber and Lyft. Yes, we talked about that. Uber and Lyft strongly opposed the original rate, warning customers that it would force them to increase prices, which you're already going to do anyway. Lyft's shares extended declines after Bloomberg report on the rules, falling as much as 3.3% to hit session lows. Uber stock, which had been up as much as 2.3% earlier Friday, hard most of its gain on the news.
Yeah, so they got a little increase.
Yep. You're getting a little boost in New York City. Not as much as you wanted, but of course, Uber and Lyft were there to make sure that they could cap it a little bit less than what was proposed. So yeah, unfortunately, but at least you're getting a nice little pay boost. So
Yeah,
enjoy that.
we're getting a pay boost ourselves in California. Governor Newsom's 60, I think 5-cent tax is going to kick in July 1st. So yeah,
Oh, for gas,
we're swimming in
gas
cash,
tax?
Uber. We got 65 cents coming up. Yeah, let's see how that goes. My
So yeah,
variable
yeah. So,
cost is just gone shot up through the roof. Still send
how
me
much?
$3 tip.
How much is a gallon of gas now?
Fuck, bro. It's like the average is about 4.25. So
So
we're
that'll be
gonna get up
$5
to,
gas.
yeah, of course.
God, lucky that the
Of
whole
course.
Israel-Iran situation took a little downplay and ceasefire, because if they close that strait, 20% of the oil comes through that strait on a daily basis. Holy shit! I can only imagine you'd be seeing $200 a gallon.
Well, we're gonna with 65 cents is just tax. It's not
Yeah.
none of the other ancillary shit that we're dealing with. It's just
No. I mean,
more
but
tax, more tax. I
yeah,
think out of 5,
any
Chris, $2 is
here's
tax.
the thing, anything that affects the cost of gas, like the price of oil and all that, that's just going to go up. Let's say it goes up $1. I mean,
Well,
you're up almost $2 then at that point.
you put the money in the tank and you burn it, and then that's 60. It's gonna look, if you have a tank of, I don't know, 10 gallons. Every time you fill up, now it's going to cost you an extra $6.50. That's disposable income. That now you might not go out to eat, once a month or twice a month. Now, it all affects things. It just, there's economics into all of this. Shameless plug. Go subscribe to my finance channel, please. But anyway, yeah. So we're gonna get that. But let's go to the next one.
Gotta love that.
Yeah, we got
all right. So let's move on. Let's talk about, should independent contractors be able to set your own rate? Well, we have our weekly story from Matt. Matt, if you're here, I know you were here earlier. But yes, we have our Matt's Corner topic segment, which actually I texted you this. I said, hey, did you see Matt's post about this? We got to put this in the show. So this one was on me. But either way, Matt's Corner. Matt said independent contractors set their own rates. Independent contractors generally set their own rates for the service they provide. This is a defining characteristic that distinguishes them from employees. As independent professionals, they have the autonomy to determine how much to charge per hour, per project, or using other pricing models. And these rates can vary from client to client or job to job. So, out of all the millions and millions of Uber drivers out there, how many times have you been able to set your rates where you want or where you feel comfortable taking rides? Let's say you have a car and it costs you 86 cents per mile just to operate that vehicle. Are you getting paid 86 cents per mile? No, maybe not. Maybe you're getting paid 70 cents on average per mile. Or what if you were looking to be able to cover the cost of your car and then actually earn more on top of that, so you could pay bills and put some into savings or whatever it might be? So maybe you wanted it to be at $1.40 per mile, something that would be a little bit easier. Are you able to do that? No. Oh, that's right. So are we really independent contractors? Or is it just, we say we're independent contractors, but yet you're really an employee because you don't pass the little test of setting your own rate?
We're dependent contractors. Contractors. We're not independent contractors.
Which dependent contractor is just a keyword for employee.
A bitch. So Ali said, I concur. However, for the sake of argument, now Ali, either you're not a driver or you don't understand how this shit works, but you responded to Matt saying, I concur. However, for the sake of argument, companies such as Uber could contend that once an offer is presented, it is entirely at the discretion of the individual whether to accept the task at the stated rate or not.
You know what? You know what though? Here's that would make perfect sense if it was just picking up and dropping off. Not a problem. If it was just picking up and dropping. Huh?
Oh, did you see this one?
Okay. I don't know. I didn't get an email. I don't have a text.
I think we're safe.
But either way, Here's one of the problems. You could say that if it was just pick up and drop off, but the problem is it's become a game. It's the gamification of rideshare. So it's like you're at the casino. You hear the bells, you hear the whistles, you hear the, hey, you better take this ride because if you don't, you're not going to get whatever it is that you're supposed to be getting. Maybe you're not going to be able to get your status because your acceptance rate. Maybe you need to hit advantage versus standard, 5% pay boost. All of these things is to gamify you to accept the lowest offer they give you. So it's built against you. So you can't really actually say that anymore, where it's entirely at the discretion. Because the problem is you as Uber are behaviorally changing the game by trying to manipulate the driver into accepting a ride that they normally would not accept in the first place.
Yeah.
So you can't actually say that anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to say, hey, that would make sense.
We did
because
have this, by
it's
the way.
literally picking up and dropping off. But the reality is that's not how Uber and Lyft are operating anymore. They gamified the system.
We had this for 9 months when AB5 was the law in California. At least they acted like it. Lyft completely ignored it, but Uber gave us a chance to bid or set our multiplier at the pace that we wanted. But then they spent 240 million and came and crushed AB5 to pass Prop 22. So that's what they did.
I mean, think about it though. That's I like the I like the multiplier rate because you could set your own multiplier. You could say, hey, this is the base rate. This is what we are going to pay drivers at the base. If you want that higher, you can set it up to 5x. And I think anything over 5x is, probably pushing it and probably not going to get that. But I think that's well within the realm of possibilities.
I think so. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
You set your multiplier too high, you go hungry for a day, then you adjust, my man. You know what I mean?
And talking about that way back when, one of the things that I always said is Uber could actually make more money by having the rates set because you're already proving that you could take that. So if you actually paid the driver more, you could actually get more money out of that particular ride. And,
it's quality over quantity, my man. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then they're like, oh, well, and then you're like, but then the problem was Uber also pitted the driver or the passenger against the driver, because if you had a fare that was, let's say 1.8x or 2x or whatever it might be, they would send a notification to the passenger saying, oh, your fare is higher because the driver has a higher rate set. So it's like, fuck you either way.
That's a good point. That's a good point. They would do that, wouldn't they? They would backstab the driver. Yeah.
No, they did that.
Yeah.
Well, they did. They actually did that. That's the thing. I'm surprised you didn't see that. Yeah, they actually did that. They would send passengers a little thing that says the driver is not driving at the rate that we offer. They're driving at a higher rate, and that's why your rate is higher.
Yeah, true. Yep. Let's go to the next one, buddy. We're
all right. With that being said, yes, you should be able to set your own rates. I think we should. We should have that. But unfortunately, so let's move on.
Dependent contractors that we are. We're dependent contractors.
Yep. All right. But let's move on. Let's talk about your favorite Trip Radar.
Fuck.
And how it's coming to airports exclusively.
Fuck. You did that beautiful story at the New York Times, right? How people go wait there for like hours and hours. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you guys could check that out. Eli Tan did a wonderful article, amazing article, but the pictures were more amazing than anything else. And so, Chris, again, people go like, that I know at these companies, like, you're picking on us, man. I'm like, I'm not picking. I'm just reading what you send me. I mean, okay. So now, Chris, we have whack-a-mole at the airports. And if those are those bots, which we know are faster than a human, every time I try to buy something on eBay, the last millisecond, I get outbid by a penny. That's a bot. I will never beat a bot. Mm-hmm. We know there are Trip Radar bots, for sure, Uber, that I told you about like months ago, but you don't give a shit. Okay. Here we go. Access faster airport matches. So what is going to happen to those poor schmucks who wait at the airport for hours for the unicorn? Now they're really screwed, Chris. Starting today, when you wait at the airport's waiting lot, all Uber airport trips in select airports will be on Trip Radar for faster matches and reduced wait times. Who does this benefit, by the way?
See, so here it is. This is the game that they play. So now, instead of just giving it to one potential driver, we're going to give it to 5. Why? Because we're not offering you enough, and we know some dumb schmuck out there will actually accept it.
Yes. Yes. This is Hunger Games
So
right
not
here.
only can we screw the driver on pay, but we're going to jack it up on the airport run because we know they need a ride, and they're going to take the ride no matter what on our platform. So we're going to put another $5 on that little ride there. So instead of just, cottonballing it at 5 cents extra per ride, we're going to get up there, like Len said, $1, $2, $3 more just for that particular.
Hey, man, we have shareholders. Come on. We need to pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Our audience is the shareholder.
Yeah, well, that's our audience. We have a broke shareholder group and they have a billionaire shareholder group. That's the difference. So how it works on Trip Radar. Okay, so I'm not picking on Uber. You have to change this because this is not making any sense. On Trip Radar, you will be able. See, I can tell, and I told this to Jeremy today too when I was talking to Jeremy. I go, all that shit that's going out to drivers is not written by somebody who drives, because if it was, it wouldn't be written that way. And here it comes. On Trip Radar, you will be able to see and request to match with all available trips. Clean the bots, Uber. Learn how this enhances your experience. Okay. 1, access requests anywhere in the line. Here it comes. You can receive requests no matter where you are in the queue. You won't need to wait until you're the first in queue to start matching. Okay. Got it. Select one or more trips. You'll see multiple airport trip requests in a single view. Trying to match with more than one trip or choosing, that means whack-a-mole, like click on everything. Click on every goddamn one. That's unprofitable. And trying to match with more than one trip or choosing not to match won't impact your acceptance rate. Great. Okay, cool. But here it comes, Chris. Read this. Match a trip. Your queue position still matters. You'll be prioritized for Trip Radar matches based on your spot in the queue. However, on the first one, what does it say? You can receive requests no matter where you're in the queue. I don't get it. Isn't that an oxymoron here? Isn't that like...
Absolutely.
So you can receive requests no matter where you are. So if you're an ant, you have 100% acceptance rate, you're going to get the shit trips so we can clean them all out without getting declined. But your queue position still matters. So you can receive requests no matter where you're in the queue, but your queue still matters. This is an oxymoron, Uber. Who wrote this shit?
Okay, the only thing I could think that could make that sound okay or make sense is if you get closer, you could get Trip Radar at any point because it's the ones that go out and just get passed over by drivers because it's a shitty ride and nobody wants to take it. So they're going down the queue of riders. But as you get closer to the front of the queue, you will get more Trip Radar. Like it'll start with the first group or batch of drivers that are at the lowest queue and then continue outward as nobody claims that particular ride. So that's probably why they're doing it. But again, Dara specifically said, if drivers aren't accepting the rides, then it's your pricing problem, not the drivers. So you got to pay accordingly. And then you don't have this problem with acceptance rate issues.
Okay, how can I receive requests no matter where I'm in queue, but then your queue position still matters?
Well, that's what I said. I think that it starts.
You work for Uber, bro.
During the first few. No, I'm using my mind and my brain and then coming up with how would this make sense? That's the only way it would make sense to me.
Okay, cool. It didn't make any sense to me. So anyway, so Trip Radar at airports. I think Matt is doing something in Boston Logan. He's going to do a video or something. Is that what he said? Something's happening. I don't know what's going on. So yeah, anyway, yeah, check it out, folks. Now, if you do go to the queue, and now that TripRadar is available to everyone in the queue, waiting 4 or 5 hours there is not making any sense for a unicorn, because they're going to probably spread the wealth as well as the garbage trips that go. What do we say about TripRadar? Where all trips go to die, and
No,
maybe
now it's where all trips go to the lowest lowest paid driver.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Look, this is not a good thing for people who do specifically airports, because there are drivers who do specifically airports, and now
Mhm.
now that your trip that you waited in queue for and walked up the queue slowly in 2-3 hours could be fed already, so you don't wait for unicorns. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. Don't go at the airports and just wait for 4 hours. It's just not going. If it worked for you before, now it's definitely not going to work.
Yeah, probably not. Or you just turn on Lyft and hope for the best there.
Yeah,
But the simple reality is, I have a feeling that they're going to try going to mostly TripRadar. You see that with standard, where you're going to get more TripRadar requests coming in. I'm sure even people in non-standard advantage cities are probably seeing more TripRadar requests coming in versus exclusive, and that's the reason why. Because this is the next level. You can only go so far. You noticed how Len was talking about, it hit a point, it hit a wall where they couldn't really get any more than that. And then all of a sudden they come up with upfront fares and it just shoots off. Well, again, you're going to hit that wall because you can only go so far, because we had that data from Gridwise that said passengers are at the top. Any higher that the prices go, they're going to find other means. They're not going to be using Uber or Lyft anymore.
Yeah.
And then the same thing, drivers, if they're paying less, that 11 months that the Uber driver is average on for is going to drop to 6 months because of
Yeah.
their doing. So, all they're doing is chasing profits over anything else. And it's unfortunate, but that's what you're going to see, because this is the next iteration. This is where you are able to send a trip radar to 20 drivers that are in the area, and the chance of them, because if you went exclusive to go to those 20 drivers, you would have to go the 10 seconds to driver 1, 10 seconds to driver 2, 10 seconds to driver 3. So between all of that with the system, you probably would have, 20 drivers. What's that? 2 minutes or 3 minutes or something. But if you send it all out to 10 or 20 drivers at one batch at one time, now that's in one time. So the driver could potentially get it if they want the lowest bid ride instead of getting exclusive. That would be paying a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree.
The passenger is going to get screwed because they're going to jack up the rate. And so it's just another way to take a little bit more money from the driver. And they're trying to reduce that. They're trying to reduce the spinner rate, trying to get a match, and also shop the ride for the lowest possible driver who will accept it at the lowest possible pay.
I agree, but Uber is going to say it's just a misleading statement. So
yeah, mislead it when we start doing the data points.
Okay, so this gentleman says, Sergio said before 1 month, everybody has upfront fares, buddy. But I said it with the exception of those 4 states. Pay attention. If you're in one of those 4, that's why you don't have it. There you go.
Yep.
Okay.
It might be only a matter of time before they actually get it, but I don't think Jersey ever will.
Jersey won't get it. He's probably in Jersey.
I don't think Jersey will ever get it. Sorry. Yeah. Enjoy the rate card while it lasts.
Lyft has upfront fares in Jersey. So go to Lyft.
Yep.
Anyway, all right. What's happening?
All right. CMT scores. Are they accurate or not?
Yeah, I got a email. I actually have to talk to CMT about this. I'm getting similar emails. Okay. So CMT, this is for you and Uber, obviously. But Uber, you can tell CMT to give me a call, Sergio@therideshareguy.com. What is happening is that CMT is sending out speeding, although this driver is 99%. But the same driver, Chris, after being this perfect, almost perfect, 99, the 100 is perfect, sent him this warning. Speeding is dangerous for you and riders. This guy doesn't speed Uber and CMT. What he's doing is that CMT has labeled the speeding or speed limits on the streets incorrectly, and it's reading it as the driver is speeding, because they have a database, Chris, that if I'm driving on Louise Avenue here, is 35. But if it's mislabeled as CMT at 30 and I drive 35, which is the speed limit, the CMT goes up, you're going fast. This guy is perfect. So you guys need to, I don't know, update your database with the speed limits. And I'm getting this a lot from like South Carolina drivers saying that we have bridges here. CMT's speed limit within their database is incorrect. We're going to speed limit, but it looks like we're speeding. Get it? Uber. Go talk to your people at CMT. It's wrong. Have them update their speed limit database. So this driver got that data from your recent trips indicates that you may have been speeding. No, he's not. He's 99. How could he be speeding? Whatever. And your safety is our priority.
The problem is, though, that how often do speed limits change on rural roads, on any type of road? The speed limit may change here or there, and it can be random, and for it to be updated across the board can take a long time. In fact, sometimes even records that are for the county or for the town may not reflect the speed limit that is posted because it's not updated properly. So yeah, unfortunately, that's part of it. And I couldn't tell you how many times I look at Waze, or I think Google now has it, but Waze has the speed limit on there, and I can't tell you how many times it's wrong, whether it's too early or too late when it comes to the speed limit change, or it's just wrong by 5-10 miles anyways, because the speed limit has changed.
Yeah, I agree. So, but this driver was like, Serge, look, some drivers care. I don't give a shit if I'm at 99 or 98 or 93 or whatever, as long as I'm above 90 or 75 right here. See, as long as you're above 75, you're all right. Because in some places, as you know, this is part of the advantage versus standard shenanigans. So, I mean, I told him, I go, ignore it. I mean, but then he goes, no, can you please, tell him? I'm like, okay, fine. And this is his stuff. So how is his speeding okay here with a check mark, Uber, but then you send the poor guy that warning that you may have been speeding? Get your shit together, man, tech company.
It's called a clerical error that went out by accident. It was not supposed to go out to drivers, and well, you could just tell everybody sorry.
Sorry.
So the emotional toll that you have just given drivers by saying, why are you telling me I'm speeding when I'm not speeding? And the emotional toll damage that is going on it, and you're just like, sorry.
Well, look, I've gotten a lot of these emails. That's why I put it up, because after I get 15, 20 emails, then I go like, okay, we should talk about this, because it's a proper thing to talk about for them to fix, so then drivers don't get these stupid emails. Anyway, or warnings. Last but not least, we have
Robotaxis are now live in Austin.
The end of Uber is here.
With a massive twist. And everybody is saying it is the end of Uber. Disruptors are going to get disrupted.
Oh, FYI, Uber
the rideshare wars.
Uber stock went up 8% today to 90. So yeah, I don't think it's a threat.
Well, you know what I know is I love watching these videos. Oh my God, it's so awesome. It's great. I love it. Robotaxi. I'm going to suck you on. Didn't say that. Don't worry. Don't spit out your coffee. But when it comes down to it, then you see the other videos where it's swerving on the other side of the road, jacking all over the place. The dude's got the friggin' they're on the kill switch engage just because, but
yeah, I mean, there was Sunday kicked off, and sure were my Twitter feed, bro. Holy crap. Every one of these, look, I love Musk, I love Tesla, don't get me wrong. But do they have a culty, crowd there, man? They love their Robotaxis, and they were all putting the videos. Oh, look, Robotaxi picked me up, and it worked. It worked. And hats off to the Tesla AI crew. doing it with cameras as opposed to with expensive lidars and lasers and things like that. But I mean, you're in a tiny little geofence area doing 2.3 mile trips. If you have FSD in your car, you've been doing that. You're just paying now $4.20 a ride for that one, just for that anyway. Now, I'm going to talk about this subject quite extensively on my finance channel, so you guys can join me there because I do trade Tesla quite often. And Tesla was up 12% last year, $45. So if you did follow that, in fact, after opening lower, it went up 12%, which was good. But look, everything in Tesla is priced for perfection. Tesla is still a car company. You know, all the Tesla fanboys are going to say, no, it's a technology company. I'm like, no, the only revenue is coming from selling cars still. When the Optimus robots come in, when Robotaxis show up, all that is going to be accretive. When? Don't know. So is Robotaxi going to do well? Yeah, I think it will. But how to scale it, the unit economics and all that good shit, I'll talk about that on my finance channel at Sergio Vidian. You can go check it out. But to me, is it the end of Uber? No. To get the density that Uber has and Lyft have, the marketplace, acquisition of the rider. Yeah, there are Tesla fanboys out there who are like, oh yeah, this is the end of Uber. I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. But I wouldn't put it behind it, by the way, that Tesla goes to Uber and uses that network, like Waymo is doing, because Uber has the network, man. Uber has the network. You guys can't mess with that shit. Like Len said, they put 35 billion on fire to create that network, the platform. And there's network effects for sure. And it wouldn't surprise me if Elon and Dara became BFFs.
I don't know. I mean, he did acquire X, so he's got even more data that's beyond Uber. So, I mean, you got a hell of a platform to advertise on right there when it happens. So,
well,
I don't know.
I think
honestly, I really don't. I think out of several of the autonomous vehicles or ideas of them, I think they would like cream their crop if they could get on Uber's platform for that particular aspect of it. But I think Tesla is beyond that.
Yeah. Well, I think Tesla, I mean, their app worked well from what I said. I don't have it, obviously. It was just in Austin, Texas. And the UI worked well. They have their own passenger app already, The cars drove well with a few exceptions, that they did crazy things, went into oncoming traffic or whatever. But bulk of it, 99%, 98%, let's say, did well. But if you have a car with FSD, you're already using it. So I wouldn't be that surprised. But the fact that you can order it on the Robotaxi app, there's an app that people who got invited to this event were able to take trips, and some of them took like 10, 15, 20 trips. And I'm going like, you take all. I guess they tested or whatever. And then they went and took Waymo trips, and they talked shit about Waymo because Waymo cars were doing shit. Look, Tesla, I'm sure, will scale a lot faster than Waymo. Okay, Waymo's cars are extremely expensive. And Tesla already has a base. And one thing I'm not buying about any of this, Chris, is that all the private Tesla owners, not fleet owners, private Tesla owners are going to put their beautiful Model Ys or Model 3s while they're sleeping to do bar pickups. I'm not buying that for one fucking second. However, I think there's going to be a good opportunity for owning a fleet of these things, especially the RoboCab, not the Model Y that you own in your garage. Buy a bunch of these at 25, 30K a pop, put them out to pasture, 22 hours they work, make you money. I think the ROI on that is going to be great. But other than that, let's not get too excited about this yet. But anyway, so that's my 2 cents about that.
All right. With that being said, that is the end of the show. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure you smash that like button because that is one big FU to Uber for coming up with upfront fares and screwing drivers and passengers alike.
Hold on. I'm being called out. Sergio's clueless when it comes to this point. Joe Driver, come to my finance channel. I'll debate you until I put you through the shredder. Comes to this point. Just look at what Waymo has done. What does Waymo have done? Uber does 1.2 million trips every hour. What does Waymo have done? The fuck are you talking about, bro? Automation will replace all drivers within 5 years. Well, come to my finance channel.
That's not going to happen.
I'll debate you, and then I'll shred you with your own bullshit.
5 years? Oh, you're an Elon fanboy, huh?
Yeah, whatever, bro.
I'm sorry, that timetable is way too early. Maybe 10 years.
Yeah,
I'll give you maybe 10 years, and it's
Thank you,
only
Matt.
in certain areas. So 5 years in specific areas, 10 years in other areas, and then maybe not at all in some other areas, unless they can figure out certain things like snow.
It's all good. It's all good.
Covering the road and all that.
Behind the Wheel coming up on Thursday. Good friend Chuck, who's also a contributor on the channel. Is it Thursday, right? It's Thursday? Okay. Chuck's coming up, interviewing a couple of different folks. If you're interested, email me, Sergio@therideshareguy.com. For any other reason, you can email me for Sergio@therideshareguy.com. With the exception of deactivations, I don't have much power when it comes to that shit. And anyway, thank you, folks.
Sergio, watch it. Your language is unprofessional.
Somebody said that?
Yeah. I'm out of here. Oh, sorry, Karen.
Bye, Laurie. Without apologies, but, you know, we're drivers.
Called the real world, honey.
Yeah. Anyway. Did you call her Karen, bro?
Yeah. Well, if you're going to be a Karen, I'm sorry. You want to be a snowflake, go kiss somebody else's ass.
Your language is so unprofessional. Hey, my language is super professional. On my finance channel, I don't cuss at all on my finance channel.
Yeah. You're like, oh, God damn it. It's taken. That falling knife. Son of a, I tried catching it.
Love you all. Be safe, stay healthy. Don't worry about any of this. Go read Len's article. Amazing article. Uber, thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Have a good one. Be safe.